we go. I'm going to start the recording. Well, good morning, everyone. Today is November the 22nd. If you can believe it, it's almost December 2020. And we're going to talk about chapter 7 of our book today. And I am so excited because this chapter touches on exactly the kinds of issues that bring together our understanding of the Bible and God, the way in which technology and science have advanced and continue to advance, and thinking about the choices we need to make, and um, you know the orientation that we need to have. I don't know if that's the right word, but just, I mean, we've talked about we're not called to be anxious, we're not called to be fearful, right? We're called to have faith, but these things, as they come together, they can cause some anxiety. There's a real temptation to have anxiety. And so I titled today's lesson A Dark Future, but we're going to be reading from Revelation 13, verses 11 through 18. So if you want to get your Bible out in preparation and turn to Revelation 13, you are welcome to do that. We are continuing to use John C. Lennox's new 2020 book, 2084, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Humanity, as our initial course text, which is going to take us into the new year. By the way, we're not going to be done with this by Christmas, but we'll finish up probably in January and then have another text that we're going to read. And so I actually am, and I don't know if we can pull this off or not, but I'm going to contact him and see if there's any way that he would connect live with us for our class. I've actually done that before with authors. He's in England, so I don't know. If we did it, we may have to schedule it like as a special thing, not during our Sunday school hour. Anyway, but we're going to give that a shot. But I haven't wanted to try that until we have really started to dive kind of deeply into the book. And I feel like here, as we're in chapter 7, we're kind of at that point. So no guarantees, but we'll see. Today, I would like to actually start with our big question, then share church announcements, have our opening prayer. We're going to read those verses from Revelation and talk about them just a little bit. And then I'm going to share some highlights of chapter 7 and give us a little bit of time for table talk. And we will have our joys and concerns today at the end. So here is our big question. It's really easy, just very, very simple. How can we ensure that a super intelligence, if it emerges, will safeguard human interests and not threaten human existence? We've been talking about artificial intelligence and these different types, where we have a narrow artificial intelligence, which is really a narrow algorithm that is doing a specific task, specific work. We think of robots that we have on factory lines, but it's also things that like recognize our faces, in Facebook or Google, recognize speech patterns, and can get better over time. Well, the fear that, some notable folks we've mentioned, like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Stephen Hawking, have had, is that we're going to see the emergence of a general intelligence that's sort of a Terminator-like intelligence, and then that's, where where the existential risk is. So anyway, we're going to be talking about this today and thinking a little bit about maybe what we need to do as a society, and certainly there's the individual level and there's the community level, and I think we're going to think a little more on the community society level today. So announcements for November 22nd, our stewardship theme continues with our theme, Our Rock in the Storm. And so if you have not submitted your stewardship pledge for next year, you can do that in any variety of ways, to include using the app for the church, which remember, the app continues to be a great way to stay in touch with our First in Focus magazine, as well as, of course, the live stream connections on Sunday and all those things. So I think that's really the best place. As Mike told us last week, the Edmond Community Thanksgiving Dinner has officially been canceled. And so they are in the process of giving away the 100+ turkeys that have been donated, and working with a local food bank and other direct, food assistance programs in the Edmond area, to be able to provide Thanksgiving food for families so that they can go ahead and cook that on their own, and not put anybody at risk, whether it's the folks coming in to dine or volunteers that are putting that together. our Sunday school classes have had a quote unquote reboot. And so I'm going to talk here in a minute just briefly about COVID-19 and some of the announcements this week, and that can certainly go into our prayer concerns. But beginning on November 29th, so that's not today, but that's next Sunday, it says in collaboration with the Family Matters class, the kids and student ministries are going to pause their Sunday school. And so they're going to plan to relaunch in January. And so they are working to provide families ministry and fellowship and study opportunities, but to do those, I think, with sensitivity to this quote unquote unusual season that we are in. On that topic, if you did not have a chance to either hear or read what Oklahoma City Mayor David Holt shared on Thursday of this week, I would encourage you to do that. He has given a challenge, a 10-day challenge to the Oklahoma City metro area. And so the restrictions that came from his office. Moose, where are you? I think my dog may have gotten stuck under my bed, so I may have to do something here in a minute. The restrictions that he put in place were really mirrors of what the governor announced. And so he didn't announce any further restrictions, but he is encouraging everyone in the whole Oklahoma City metro area for the next 10 days to really try and get our numbers down. He said in his talk, Moose, come here. Sorry about this. Come here. Are you stuck? Come here. Sorry, that's never happened before, but our dog, who likes to get into small places, I think got into a place he couldn't get out. So I think he can get out now. Not to try and add levity to a very serious topic. Mayor Holt said in his presentation that in the last 10 days, we've gone from 300 new cases a day to 800 new cases a day, and we've just, really skyrocketed. And so, with the holidays coming up and the potential that has for additional spread, he encouraged everyone to take this seriously and to consider the ways in which we can protect ourselves and also protect those in our community. In the course of kind of looking through the data, I found this website. This is from the Oklahoma County Health Board. And so they have this dashboard of just Oklahoma County statistics. And there's a lot here, and a lot of that is small. So I've got this middle one here, which is the new daily cases and rolling average kind of picked out. But, the nationwide averages and the things happening in different regions are important to pay attention to, but they don't quite have as much relevance as our local data does. And so this one that I've highlighted here is just a very sobering graph if you look at the 7-day rolling average, because that is an exponential growth curve. That is a curve that is approaching vertical. And so that's why I think Mayor Holt has encouraged everyone to really try and flatten the curve. And that's what we did back in March overall. Our state and our local municipalities are not, issuing a lockdown requirement and order, but they're definitely encouraging us to take those precautions. And so we haven't been to this restaurant in a long time, but Cafe de Brazil had a good reminder there to say, hey, remember to continue to patronize our small businesses. And even if you're not going to dine in places, we were doing that during the spring, was we were kind of taking an evening a week and saying, all right, this is our dine out, and we would go, pick up something for carry out. So there is your public service announcement, but that actually I think does certainly play right into joys and concerns of things that we need to be in prayer for. So I want to open us with prayer. Our photographs for today's opening prayer come from Shelley's third grade classroom at Cassidy. I think we had a little bagel together before class on Wednesday or Thursday, and I snapped a couple pictures. Their word of the week, appropriately, was gratitude for this week, and so it was just lovely. And the students wrote the things that they were grateful for dogs, grateful for nature, grateful for God. And they had an activity where they were brainstorming together on ways that they can shine their light for others. And shining the light of Jesus that we invite into our hearts is definitely what we need to be doing today and every day. So let's open up with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that you've given us to be here in these different places, God, at our houses, wherever we are, God. We are together in spirit, and we are here to worship you. We're here to open your word, and Lord, we're here to invite you to speak to us. So, God, I pray that as we consider our lesson today and some of these ideas from John Lennox in his book, most importantly, Lord, the words of John in Revelation, that you would just open up our minds, you would open up our hearts, that you would enable us to see, Lord, the things that that Jesus came here to show us and to tell us, and that you would walk with us this day, that you would protect us, that you would protect our families this day and in the days to come. It's in your Son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. I guess I kept the picture from last week. So we're going to go ahead and open up the Bible to Revelation. Again, this is Revelation 13, verses 11 through 18. And as you're opening up your Bibles, I'll tell you a quick story. So Shelley and I met on a mission trip to Tijuana, Mexico, when we were both in Lubbock, Texas, and we were members of Westminster Presbyterian Church, which was the church she grew up in ever since I think they moved from but she lived in Canadian and Whiteface, if you know those small communities in West Texas. Her parents were both from Dalhart. Anyway, I think when she was 2, they moved to Lubbock. Well, I moved to Lubbock. I lived in Lubbock in the late 70s when my dad was stationed at Reese, at the Air Force Base there. But then I moved there for pilot training in 1993, and I ended up staying until 2006 when we came here to Oklahoma. Anyway, when we went on that mission trip, our pastor, who was leading the trip, picked Revelation as a study text, which was really interesting. But it was, for me, the deepest dive I think I had ever taken, as a believer, ever in my life, whether it's like, youth Sunday school and Bible study, or as an adult. And so I really did enjoy and appreciate that opportunity. And, one of the things that I took away from that study of Revelation, and we did these, I remember doing studies kind of on our way, and I don't know how many we did throughout the course of our week. We had a spring break mission trip, was that, Revelation is not only, it is a book of prophecy, um, but it is also a book that, there were prophecies, we believe, that were fulfilled. The destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in like 70 AD. It is very challenging to understand and to discern, but like all books of the Bible, Revelation is useful for instruction, but it is something that is not simply a look back at the history which was prophesied in days of old, but it also looks forward, to our future. So this is Revelation 13, and this is starting out with verse 18. This, if you start at the top of chapter 13, which we won't do today, there's an initial beast that comes out of the ocean, and this is the telling of the second beast that comes out of the earth. And this is John, remember, who was in prison on the island of Patmos. And so most of Revelation recounts things that he saw in visions as he was living there on Patmos. And so this is what we read. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of the name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. So I'm now going to read the Message interpretation of these verses. And what I want to draw your attention to and encourage you to look for is anything specifically that really comes out to you, especially as we contrast this NIV translation from the Greek to the Message interpretation. And one of the things that I'm going to draw our attention to for our lesson is thinking about surveillance and thinking about the ways in which state authority can be exercised and in fact is being exercised in some places, most notably China and Western China, for surveillance, but then also for the very permission to engage in economic activity in the society. So this is the same set of verses from Revelation 13, but this is again from the Message from Eugene Peterson. I saw another beast rising out of the ground. It had two horns like a lamb, but sounded like a dragon when it spoke. It was a puppet of the first beast, made of earth, and everyone in it made earth and everyone in it worship the first beast, which had been healed of its death blow. This second beast worked magical signs, dazzling people by making fire come down from heaven. It used the magic it got from the beast to dupe earth dwellers, getting them to make an image of the beast that received the death blow and lived. It was able to animate the image of the beast so that it talked, and then arrange that anyone not worshiping the beast would be killed. It forced all people, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to have a mark on their right hand or forehead. Without the mark of the name of the beast or the number of its name, it was impossible to buy or sell anything. Solve a riddle. Put your heads together and figure out the meaning of the number of the beast. It's a human number, 666. So I picked these verses because they're referenced in chapter 7 of our book today. And as, again, we think about surveillance and we think about the ways in which supercomputing and whether it would be a super intelligence or just incredibly powerful computing technology, can be utilized by humans to really, listen to everything they do, monitor everything they do, and try and control everything they do. So is there anything that stood out for you in comparing those two verses, or just anything that stands out to you as you hear these words from Revelation? And if we stare awkwardly at each other too long, I assure you I will move on. Shelly, can I get you to say anything or not? She's like, no, Wes, you can't. No, I can't. Okay, well, we'll just move on then.
I can. Well, I mean, it always makes me wonder. I've always wondered about that number, and the mark of the beast. And, at times I've thought it was a credit card number. You couldn't buy anything without your credit card number. But that the number always bothered me a little bit about having it on my wrist or on my forehead. And hopefully I will be able to resist that number. I don't know. It's strange. I've never quite understood Revelations.
Right.
So
Well, it's super challenging to try and, I think, try to understand the context of. I mean, this is one of those places where and there's so many in the Bible, right, where we can't just read it simplistically and literally. We risk, if we try to do that in this case, and in some cases of prophecy, I think it would be easy to misapply and to go all kinds of different directions. I went to go ahead, Mike.
Verse 18.
Interesting though that
verse 18 in the NIV.
both talk.
okay.
This calls for wisdom.
Okay.
So, Mike, you're saying verse 18. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. That number is 666.
I'll just.
So, is there a meaning there that we're supposed to know?
Go ahead, Mike. Mike has a thought, I think.
It seems interesting that here the Bible's referring to a number um, of some sort of importance, and now we're in an age that we're getting more and more dependent upon numbers.
Yep.
To everything we do, computers, that's what they
Sign
work
up.
on, numbers. Zero,
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
talking about that.
You wonder if there's some correlation there.
Right.
Well,
Matt?
I've always,
Goes to your computer.
my memory tells me that, which isn't too good anyway, but my memory tells me that 666 means evil.
I mean, I think that's what it's been associated with over time, is that it's
So that's the number of man, evil.
sinful man.
Yeah.
Well,
But we
Well-
have three people here, so you may be hearing different voices, but we have Stuart, who's not in the picture. There's Stuart right there.
Am I there?
There's kind of
Hello.
Stuart. And we have our friend Susan. There's Susan.
Hello, Susan. We see your hand.
There she is.
There she is.
And so we were all kind of talking and didn't catch the question at first. So we've been discussing that. So we were
No.
just talking about, it's just scary, the number that there's so much tracking. It's kind of like the tracking and all
Right.
of that.
Yep. Well, and I didn't put this in, but when I was at a very impressionable age as a freshman in high school, I remember going to our state capital, Topeka, because I grew up in Manhattan, Kansas, and went to this state, government study thing that was like multiple days. And and this other freshman and I roomed with these two seniors. So, we had, I don't know if it was HBO or Showtime or whatever, but I had never seen this movie before. There was this movie called Damien the Omen, and we watched it. And I don't know how much sleep we got, but I know that led me at that time, this is in 9th grade, just to read Revelation and look at this and also to be scared, thinking about these things happening were these going to happen. And so we need to definitely overgird all of our study of Revelation and thinking about end times with some really important scriptures that come through where, Jesus tells us to not be anxious, to not be afraid, to not fear, to give him our burdens. Jesus never is quoted in any book of the Bible saying, be scared, be very, very scared. He never says that. And in addition, we learn that we will not know the day or the time. Our daughter, Rachel, who is in 11th grade, I mean, she is hearing all kinds of things all the time from TikTok, from, YouTube, from social media. And, we are living in the perfect storm day for gossip today, and some of these are conspiracy theories, but there's all kinds of things, being shared. And she said the other day something about maybe, well, the Mayans said that the world was going to end in, was it 2012? But if you add these certain years together, I think people have always done that throughout time, right? Trying to say, well, this is the time it's going to happen. And, I know when it will happen. Well, I think the Bible's pretty clear that, we don't know that this is going to come like a thief in the night and it's going to be quick, and we're not called to be afraid. So, but depending upon what kind of popular movies you watch, things that you read, certainly the world is going to encourage a fearful outlook on all of this. And that's sort of important too, just in terms of technology in the future, is that we've got a lot of folks talking about dystopia, and a very negative future versus a utopia. All right. So, go
Jeff
ahead.
and I, real quick, Jeff and I just noticed kind of the difference between the two, the message in the NIV in that sentence we were just talking about. The NIV makes that second to the, so verse 18 makes it sound like 666 is the number of a man, like it's referring to a man.
Right.
But the message sounds like it's a human number, like it's how humans count things. Is 666. So it's not necessarily, it's a riddle, and it's referring to a human number, not necessarily a specific person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. We can have a lot of debates about this, and we're going to puzzle over this. And I believe that there are things for sure in this world, in this universe, that we are not going to completely understand and comprehend. You know, the disciples actually complained about that sometimes when Jesus would just tell parables, right? He's like, why do you speak in parables? And you know, even though he was saying the same thing, and he was, by the way, doing miracles in front of them, and there were all these demonstrations, you know, everyone around did not realize he was the Son of God. He was able to do miracles. He was, you know, prophetic. There were folks that were right there that didn't understand. We're going to have things. There are things that we're not going to completely understand. And I think that message interpretation does point to that, where this is like an enigma. This is a puzzle. This is something that, you know, but it's interesting too, where we're challenged here to try and figure it out. And actually that's important, because this will just be Wes's thought. I don't think that we're supposed to just put our heads in the sand and ignore everything that's happening around us. I think that we do need to pay attention to what's going on and decide how we're going to respond. How will we respond as individuals? How will we respond as a community, as a society? And I think, as I have mentioned before, and maybe last time, like, man, though, the United States of America needs us as Christians to have our voices as part of the way in which laws are not only enacted, but they're interpreted. And, you know, the moral compass of Christianity has been historically hugely important in our nation, and it will continue to, because if we just rely on science, or we just rely on a secular worldview, you know, how do we decide what is good and what is bad, you know, what our morality is? So thanks, Lisa, for pointing that out about verse 18. All right. Well, one of the things that's referenced in the chapter.
Wes,
Yep. Go ahead.
Before you move on,
Okay.
having that 666 on your hand makes me think of these implants that even some companies today have had their employees get implants in their hand.
Right.
And was that the beginning or leading up to what we see in the future, that everyone will have implants in them
Even
to
on
identify?
Yep. Even on buses, I've heard of reports of some school districts that have tried not an implant, but by having the kids, you know, have a token that's on their backpack, and they're able to tell whether they're on the bus or not, whether they're at school or not. But, you know, sometimes parents will raise that kind of concern. Wait a minute, you know, this tracking is going too far. And when you think about an implant that's in your skin, that really makes you think about this. When I visited Hong Kong in 2011, I think, the fellow who toured me around the first day had this amazing watch. It was called an octopus watch, but it had a chip in it. And literally all he did was wave his watch, you know, everywhere when we went on the ferries, you know, between islands, and when we were at the restaurant. That's all he did. Whoop, whoop. He just swiped, you know, but hey, what's Apple Pay? You know, what does that allow us to do? Convenience, something that sounds great, but then how will it be used? Will the authorities choose to use it in a way, you know, that is going to be very controlling and oppressive? You know, I don't think we're there yet, but when you
our son-in-law is the district transportation manager, director in Cabot, Arkansas. And this fall, they had a child that got on the bus, but didn't make it home. So they started going through all their videos. They have cameras on all their buses. And they started going through their video, and they found where the child got on the bus, and the child got off the bus where they were supposed to, but the child didn't make it home. It turned out that the child had gone to a friend's house, and the parents at the friend's house didn't notify them. So the mother, of course, parents were frantic because the child didn't show up at home. But, you know, the chips in people, and like you say, that person, his watch, I think we're we're coming to that.
We are, and that's a good segue, Ken. Actually, talking about surveillance, because when I was our technology director at Cassidy for 4 years, I had the purview, basically everything that was technology, and that included all of our surveillance cameras. And we would have these little signs, that said area under surveillance, and we would tell people. But I think it was easy to forget sometimes that even when you were in your classroom, certainly when you walked out in the hallway, you were under, constant video surveillance. We didn't have a system at that time that uploaded all of our video to a cloud service for analysis. But one of the things that we looked at, in fact, even when Alexander our son was looking at internships, there are companies that would allow you to have all your video, and you could start to ask it questions like, wait a minute, did a white Jeep come on our campus? And it would be able to tell you that. Or because of your bones in your face and how facial recognition works, even with a mask, they're making facial recognition more and more accurate. Where was this person? They were on the bus and they got off the bus. Where were they next? And so we are at a point today, and not, these aren't everywhere. The cameras aren't everywhere, and the technology hasn't been deployed for all of that. A lot of our video camera systems are older. They're not fully digital, and there are different issues with it, but the capability is there to have a surveillance state that feels very oppressive and very biblically prophesied, perhaps, which is kind of the segue here. So I mentioned this before, I think. If you have not watched this PBS Frontline special, this is called China Undercover. I'm listening to a podcast right now. It's actually about World War II. It's by this guy, Dan Carlin. It's called Hardcore History. And these podcasts are like 4 hours long. It's crazy. It's called Supernova in the East, but it's a deeper dive into Japan and things that happened in Japan and that Japan did in the 20s and the 30s, leading up to the Second World War. And one of the things that he was just talking about was, how with some of the horrors of what happened in Japan, and he recounted, which has different words, but one of the things is the Rape of Nanking, and what Japanese soldiers did in Nanking when they took that country over and just rampaged it. We really can be critical as we sit back in our 21st century chairs and look back at history, saying, "Oh my gosh, well, we wouldn't have tolerated that. Well, we wouldn't have stood for that." But right now, in the Western provinces of China, it is not a wholesale killing of an ethnic minority like with ovens and the ways in which that occurred to the Jewish people and other ethnic minorities in Europe during the Second World War in Germany, under Nazi Germany and under Adolf Hitler. But what is happening is literally we're confident over 1 million, maybe as many as 2 million people have been relocated to camps where they're being, quote, re-educated. And people in the Western province of China, the Uyghurs, they have to have a smartphone, and they have to have an app on their phone that tracks every single conversation, every single text message. They cannot participate in society buying or selling anything without their number on their phone that is completely monitored. It is as close as what we've ever seen to a totalitarian state of monitoring every single action. And then if you are saying something, or if you're doing something that they regard as threatening, you are shipped off to a re-education camp. And so it's happening. The world community has not stood up to stop it. And where does this end? What's the end game? The Chinese government has very different values than we do in the United States. And we need to stand for our values. And where do our values come? Well, a big part of those values comes from our Judeo-Christian heritage. So chapter 7 is titled Artificial General Intelligence. The future is dark. And it's a question. And this may be the first Presbyterian Church Sunday school class you've ever had where Vladimir Putin is quoted, but he's got the quotation in the top of this chapter. And this is what Putin said: artificial intelligence is the future, not only for Russia, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world. So when I'm listening to this podcast about World War II, and I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. I mentioned before we started today that we're doing a little movie marathon at our house with The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. We're going to try to do all 6 movies, which is going to be kind of crazy. It's going to take a long time. But I love Tolkien, and one of the quotes I love from Tolkien is, I think it's in The Return of the King, when Pippin and Gandalf are in Minas Tirith, and they're looking out at Mordor, and Gandalf says, "The board is set, the pieces are moving." When you read, for instance, the history of World War II or World War I or whatever, a lot of theories of history, it looks like, pieces are moving. Think about, the assassination of the Archduke Francis Ferdinand in 1917 in the former Yugoslavia. That was the event that was the powder keg that set off the entire First World War. We just had Veterans Day on November 11th, because that was Armistice Day, when that war to end all wars happened. But these things took place, and then these dominoes fell. When you study World War II and you look at what was happening in Japan and what was happening in Europe, and the ways in which these things happened, it's like, who could stop that? And we call them the greatest generation in the United States, those that served in World War II, not just on, the Pacific theater and the European theater, but at home as well. Like, they had to stop evil that was horrific. It was darkness, and it was stopped. But I wonder, and I start thinking the same kind of way as we see these things happening in China and in other places, and we see this competition for artificial intelligence. Where are we going? Are we going to need to take a stand against darkness in the same way that our ancestors have, in different chapters and different eras of history? I don't know if you're familiar with Prometheus. I'm not super up on my Greek mythology, but I thought this was fascinating, and this is part of what our author talks about in the beginning of this chapter. Prometheus was a figure of Greek mythology credited with the creation of humanity from clay. He defied the gods, he stole fire, he gave it to humanity as a civilization. And so the punishment for Prometheus was that he had to push this rock up this hill every single day, and then like a bird came and ate his liver. And then every day the rock rolled down, and he had to do it over and over again. This was his punishment forever. Now, it's interesting, the parallel here, because when we think about Genesis, and this is what our next chapter, this is why I'm excited about this, because this is like right why I wanted to do this book. Chapter 8 is going to take us into Genesis and our understanding of who God is and who we are, and how we need to remember that. Because if we try to become God or act like God, the Tower of Babel, that whole story, we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to remember who God is, and God does his thing and we do our things. God has given us important rights and responsibilities to be stewards of the planet. But God does not want us to try and be God. So anyway, Prometheus is a Greek figure, but it's a myth, and it's also interesting too. At the end of this is from Wikipedia. It says he's sometimes presented as the hero of the flood story. So interesting history here, but this idea, is not only in Christian biblical writing, that if humans try to take on the powers of God, it doesn't go well, and it never has. So here is a quotation from the end of the book, and they're quoting Max Tegmark. I'm going to show you the name of his book that he's citing here. Tegmark writes about the future with AI, and he developed several different scenarios that could happen. Some of them even have God in their title, and this is what what we read in our book. Tegmark observes that many people like the protector of God scenario because of its similarity to major monotheistic religions. Let's turn to the biblical source of those religions to see what it has to contribute, in particular the book of Genesis. That's where we're going to go next. So Tegmark's book, which I have not read yet, is called Life 3.0, Being Human in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. And he is a mathematician, and he's one of the people that's really prominent in the organizations, international organizations, promoting and trying to promote ethics and the development of ethical guidelines to go alongside the development of this AI. Another book that's referenced here, which I have not read, but I need to read, is C.S. Lewis, The Abolition of Man. And so I want to give you a quotation here that is shared in our book. We read, "It's easy to imagine that in whatever direction the future develops, progress toward it will be essentially continuous, but in connection with AGI scenarios," and that means general artificial intelligence. Narrow is like robots that are just doing a specific thing. General AI is the omniscient, sort of Terminator AI. So in connection with those scenarios, that is hardly likely to be the case, as there may come a time in the future, as C.S. Lewis pointed out in his book, The Abolition of Man, when one generation has the power to alter the nature of all succeeding generations. And here we're talking about biotechnology. We now know this can be done by germline genetic engineering. Such a dystopic scenario can be thought of as human beings trying to play the role of God, or Homo Deus, where Deus is a malevolent God. And this is a quote that kind of takes us to where we will go next week in chapter 8. This is what, I'm not going to say his name right, Budzasat, I'm not even going to try that. Philosopher J, abbreviated JB, the University of Texas. Genesis, I think, is the crux of it. To abolish and remake human nature is to play God. The chief objection to playing God is that someone else is God already. If he created human nature, if he intended it, if it is not the result of a blind fortuity that did not have us in mind, then we have no business exchanging it for another. It would be good to remember that Genesis contains not only the story of creation, but the story of Babel, or the presumption of men who thought they could build a tower to heaven. And then he's continuing and paralleling C.S. Lewis here, where he says, "You say you want man to be himself what God has been to man, but what God has been to man is man's absolute superior, and man cannot be his own superior." So that when we think about that initial quote from Putin, if we're heading towards a place where there's one person or even a small group of people who are in control of everyone, wait a minute, full stop, let's put on the brakes. Because, we always need to recognize and live with the understanding that God is over us. And if we put human beings in that kind of a position, it is oppressive. Human beings, because we are sinful and because of all these different things, like that just doesn't go well when you imbue and give a single person absolute power over everyone else. And the Constitution of the United States embodies those ideas to have separation of powers and checks and balances, all of those kinds of things. So on the thought of choices, this is a picture of our girls at Starbucks from 2009. So this is 11 years old. I don't know if you're overwhelmed at all by choices. We were at the new Brahms over at Penn and Britain yesterday, and goodness gracious, Brahms, Starbucks, there's just so many choices that we have here. But do we realize how our choices even now are being shaped by algorithms? How aware are we of this? We spent 2 weeks watching this Social Dilemma and talking about the Social Dilemma documentary. And one of the clear messages here is that technology is constantly trying to nudge us in different directions. And sometimes it is to get the, pumpkin spice frappuccino or whatever. But there's other ways that folks are using that technology to try to nudge us. And in some cases, if we would be part of the Uyghur minority in Western China, it wouldn't be a nudge. Technology is actually being used to identify if we're a threat to the state and then ship us off to a re-education camp. That's happening today, right now in 2021. And these things are not just the ideas of science fiction. This is stuff that's occurring right now. And so one other book that's referenced, and I'm going to add these, we have on our webpage for our class, I've got a link that references just other texts. And I actually did start. I think I have read 1984 before by Orwell, but I hadn't read. Oh gosh, there are some other books that have been referenced here. That
Animal
I've read.
Farm?
It wasn't Animal Farm. It was the other view that what we talked that. Oh gosh. See, I don't have it on my slide, and I'm over 50 now, so my brain can't pull it up so quick. It's another guy that has, rather than the 1984 everything's controlled. His view is that we kind of entertain ourselves to death. I will think of that. I had not heard of this. This is David Bell's book. It's called Superintelligence and Worldviews. And this is also pointing to the idea that the ethics we have, the morality we have, the worldview we have is really, really important, because you can't ignore God and morality when you talk about the uses of technology like we're discussing and the uses of AI here. Okay, so here's our question, and we've got a little bit of time here, and I'm gonna pause the recording. So this question comes straight from the text. The question then is, how can we ensure that such a superintelligence will safeguard human interests and not threaten human existence? Putting this another way, we might ask, what worldview will a superintelligence or an AGI, that's artificial general intelligence, have? This is an important question, since that worldview will have to be embedded by the human constructors and software programmers. What might that worldview be, and on what values will it be based? And I would just say one more thought here before I pause. We're not doing a very great job of this right now. If you think about the social dilemma, folks, I'm positive that one of the reasons we are so polarized today as a society, and there's so much anger, and it's so hard for us to even talk about politics, is because the platforms that are connecting us are engineered in such a way that it favors those kinds of conversations. We are not regulating that today, and I believe we're going to have to do something about it. I don't think it was an intended consequence in Silicon Valley, but it is a little scary to think of the power that these programmers have had, and they'll continue to have, over things like democratic discourse in our society, and they do have that. So Shelley, I might actually have her give a quick thought about this wild robot. We were talking about this. She's been reading this with her kids, and I think I'm going to read this over the holidays too. It's a fictional book, but it's about the development of an AI that this robot has. But they don't actually, she said, it's not actually engineered to be good or bad. It's just created, to work. So here's our big question. I am going to stop the recording.
Wes,